Hey there, this is Jonas Pilz from Maxon, and today I'm going to talk about motion capture performance and how it is related to Cinema 4D. You will learn how to apply a control rig to characters rigged and animated using mocap clips coming from Mixamo in order to adjust those clips, and how to use the free motion capture library coming with Cinema 4D on custom characters. I'll explain the retargeting workflow in Cinema 4D as well as how to blend motion capture clips. And last but not least, we're going to talk about recording motion capture performance. Did I just say we? Yes, I did, because today I'll be joined by mocap actress Marta Svetek, who is going to share her experience about the process of recording motion capture performance, along with some useful tips and tricks when it comes to planning behavior trees, preparing for the shoot, acting, and many other exciting aspects of motion capture. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, the first thing I want to show is how you can download a character from Mixamo with mocap animation applied to it, and then how to set it up inside of Cinema 4D so you can adjust the animation. I already chose a character here from Mixamo, but you can also upload your custom characters, and then you would go to Animations, search for an animation that you would like to apply to the character, like a walk cycle, and just click it. This one, for example, and it will be applied here. You can also check the in place checkbox. This will make the character just walk in place if you prefer that. And then you can download the character as an FBX, for example, and you can choose if you want to download it with skin or without skin. Without skin would only be the joint hierarchy, and with skin means that you can download the full character, which comes with the advantage that it also includes the default pose, like the T pose. We can download this character now, but I already did that in advance, so let's jump into Cinema 4D. Alright, here we are in Cinema 4D, and I'm just going to drag and drop the walking FBX that I downloaded into Cinema 4D, which will bring up the FBX import settings dialog, but we leave everything as is and just hit OK, and this will import the character, including its animation. Now here is one thing that you need to know. Usually these downloaded Mixamo files are coming with multiple takes. So let's have a look at the takes manager, and here you can see that there are 3 takes, and the only one we need is the mixamo.com one here. So let's select it, go to File, Current Take to New Document, and this will clean up the take manager. I'm going to rename this, and now we can go back to the Objects tab here. Right, the next thing I want to do is to keep things clean. I create a null and make these hierarchies here a child of the null. I'm going to rename this to Ape because this is the name of the character. And now we can start building the rig. But before we do so, we need to make sure that the animation is deactivated and that the character is in its default pose, in the bind pose, the T pose. So I open up the timeline with this button, and then I click this little icon here, which is the film strip. Once this is gray, all of the animations are deactivated, and this is exactly what I want. And the second thing that we need to do is we need to select the weight tag here and reset it to its bind pose. This wouldn't be possible if we didn't do the takes thing before. All right, and now we can build the Mixamo control rig. So let's go to the character menu and choose the character object. I'm also going to make this a child of the ape group here. And here you can see we've got 4 steps: building the rig, adjusting the rig, binding the rig, and animating the rig. And here you can see that we've got multiple templates to choose from. We've got bipeds, quadrupeds, and also a car rig, but we need the Mixamo control rig, and down here in the components section we can start building it by simply pushing buttons. So let's create the root. Now we can create the pelvis. Now we can create arms and legs. I'm going to start with the legs, and I'm going to hold down Control and Shift because this will keep the pelvis selected and will create symmetrical legs. And then I'm going to create 2 arms simply by holding down Control or Command on the Mac, and without any shortcut, the hands. And now we already created the full rig structure. If I deactivate the other 2 hierarchies here, you can see that we've got a full rig and it's already working as well. but first of all, we need to adjust it in order to apply it to the character. So let's go to the adjust section here. And now you can see that magically all of these little circles here snapped into place. They are now exactly at the position of the joins which were coming with the Mixamo file. So usually this is the step that you would have to do manually to place all of these circles in the right positions. And this is also a step that takes a little bit longer, but as you can see here, they are just snapping into place and it's all working. Now the next thing we would have to do is the binding, but because the character is already coming with weights, we can skip that and directly jump to animate. And now you can see that the whole hierarchy here changed, but we can go to the character object if that's too much for you, and we can go to the display tab, and down here under managers we go to object manager and don't show the full hierarchy but just the controllers. So now we can fold this away and this will just show us the controllers. Cool. So there are two more things that we need to do. The first thing is in the master controller, we go to the retarget master and we need to retarget the rig. And this is based on a namespace, and the namespace is Mixamo rig colons. And you can see that the whole joint hierarchy that is coming from Mixamo has this string as a prefix. And this one is referring to this prefix here. Okay, so let's just hit retarget all. And then we go to the weight transfer. And here we need to drag and drop in all of the geometries of the character. In this case, it's just one, but these can also be multiple. And then we click transfer weights. And then the whole thing is done already. So now we can select the controllers. We can move the object, and let's undo this and let's also make the Mixamo rig invisible to tidy up the view. We can also grab the arms. You can see there is an IK applied to the arm, but this can also be switched to FK. And let's also double check the foot controller and let's move the foot. That's also perfect. All right, now if we hit play, nothing is animating because we need to go back to our timeline and click this little button again in order to activate all animations. And now you can see that we've got this whole animation that we imported from Mixamo, but we also have the Mixamo control rig applied. And this means that we can now adjust this animation. For example, we can select the spine controllers here, and then we go to the rotate tool, and under object axis we choose per object manipulation, and we can make him a little bit sad, for example. We can also make him lower his head. And now if we play the animation, you can see that he's walking like that. And doing this without the Mixamo control rig would be incredibly difficult. So another thing we can do is we can now, for example, add some animation. Let's just add some head rotation animation. And let's do it like this. Let's move his head or rotate his head to something like this. Set another keyframe and another one. And then let's just reset it to the state before. And I'm just going to control, click and drag this keyframe here over. And now we have this. We added a head rotation to this walk cycle. So it's a pretty powerful rig that you can use to adjust animations downloaded from Mixamo. But another thing I wanted to show you is the mocap library that is coming with Cinema 4D for free. So we can open up the asset browser, and in here we can see that there is a motion capture category. We've got two folders in here, one for a model and then another one for a bunch of motion capture clips. It's 100 items that we have here. And let me go to list view and make this a little bit smaller so we can see what we have. So there's a lot of clapping in here, but if we scroll down, it's all of the basics. We have crawling, dying, falling. We've got a fireball animation here, idle to sprint, and sprinting loops, of course. loops for walking, running, jogging, and stuff like that, idles for sitting and standing. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you can use for free. And before I show you how you can assign these clips to your characters in Cinema 4D, let's talk to Marta Svetek, who is the mocap actress behind these clips. Hey Marta, good to have you here. How are you doing?
Hello, hi, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you and talk about this side of motion capture.
Yeah, cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you became a mocap performer?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it, really. I've always been a huge fan of video games and visual effects. Surprise, surprise. And it became such a big thing, especially after Lord of the Rings, Andy Serkis and everything, that everybody was kind of aware that it existed. And one day, when I was kind of just for fun doing acting stuff, I came across this one-day workshop in performing for motion capture here in London. I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. Let me try it out. So I went there, and just from the first day, I was completely hooked. And afterwards, cool. I just really worked really hard and got the right skills and understanding of what motion capture requires in order to provide the best possible performance and data. That's kind of how I got to the point that I am at now.
That's really cool. So what types of mocap systems do exist, and what is the difference, and maybe also your preference?
There's a fair few, but the main ones that people will be familiar with or will come across are the optical passive system, which is the optical system, which is the one where you have all those infrared cameras around you, and you have the actor in the middle with all the dots, all the markers on them. And the other major one is the inertial system. So that'll be the suit, like the XN suit, the Rococo suit, like that side, that suit behind me over there. See, I can't even point on a camera. So those are the ones where it's just a suit and you have that sort of freedom of movement, and you don't need a big set stage to do motion capture with.
That's cool. And when you then create a locomotion system, some moves are more important than others. And can you tell us a bit more about the prioritization and movement trees?
Yeah, so I would say first off, I would mention, there's different types of capture. So the main two types are motion capture, which is, body, and you have performance capture, which is where you also have the head mounted camera, or HMC, as if you're in the business, you call it that. And those are two very different types of performance and what they would be used for. And a lot of the stuff, let's say, that we did in the new Cinema 4D content browser, a lot of the data in there, that is what you call a locomotion shoot. That falls under motion capture, like pure motion capture. We didn't do anything with the face, but we are recording motion, locomotion, like body, natural motion through certain movements. That is supposed to save time for the animator, while also really in a lot of detail bringing the natural biomechanics of a human being into the CG world. So locomotion would be a lot of short clips, like a walk cycle, a run cycle, sprint, sit down, anything like that. If you want to talk video games, you also have idles, things like that, when the character is standing still but still looks alive, all that kind of stuff. You mentioned movement trees. Now, this is when you want to flesh out a character. Maybe you get the chance to go into mocap volume and want to get as much data that you could use over time as possible, like build up your own little library. Or you're trying to really flesh out this character, but you don't quite know what the exact shot list you have is. Or ultimately, again, I'm going to say this concept comes from video games where moves need to come in at any point that the player triggers it. You can't there's no defined path for the sequence of moves yet. So what you have is the character, let's say a zombie, and you realize that you need to record how it walks, how it runs, how it attacks, probably a few versions of those things, how it lies down, how it's alert, not alert, how it turns left, how it turns right. But not just that, how it turns left 90 degrees versus how it turns left 125 degrees. And, and same thing for the right side, how it walks backwards. If it's just standing there, how it like moves to make it not look repetitive or robotic. You do something called inserts. You want to plan out the shoot for a character in a way where you get all the different movements that you need, and also think about how they stitch together. So when you make these, they're basically massive Excel spreadsheets with notes and things on them. When you plan that out, try to think of every conceivable move in small chunks that this character could do and you would potentially want them to do, and write all of that out. And the other one is, if you're ever going to have them just standing around, maybe it's one of the characters that's a little bit more behind the main one and you just need some more like crowd-like movements. You want to have like, yes, it's standing around, and then maybe inserts where you can pepper in random movements like, a shuffle or like a little shake if it were still like on a zombie thing, or a little look around to make it a little bit more natural. Like you can then add those at certain points, so it's not just a loop of it going like, because the viewer will very quickly pick that up. That's a lot of information right there.
Yeah, but it's cool. It's packed with cool tips and so on. So exciting. How would you prepare the set for a mocap shoot? Is it common to place markers or other navigational helpers, or what do you do to prepare the set?
So depending on what system you're using. So if you're using an optical system, there's a good chance that this will be with an established studio. Optical systems are very expensive. There are some, workarounds that use HTC Vive markers and things like that, but it can be quite complicated. You will have to calibrate the space. Like I said, most of the time for optical systems, you'll be renting out an existing volume, as you call it. That's what you call a mocap stage. And the team there will do the calibration for you. Make sure that everything's aligned correctly. With an inertial suit, you will basically plug it in, usually into the machine, or if it's or once you basically establish the connection via Wi-Fi, because that's how they connect to the computer, you will do a ROM, essentially a range of motion test, and you'll do that with the passive one as well. Don't get me wrong. With the passive one, you will do the range of motion at the end after the space has been calibrated. And I can go into the reasons why one thing happens after the other a little bit. But basically, the range of motion is when you get the performer in the suit, to do a certain sequence of moves to make sure that basically the computer is recognizing all movements correctly, that all markers are assigned correctly, that it's all, you do this kind of stuff and like a squat and whatever else, just to make sure that everything's calibrated. With an inertial suit, it might be similar, but it might also involve, just standing really still for 10 seconds. Because as you can imagine, the inertial suit is then the system, and the system isn't fully aware of the space around you. So it needs that much extra help to understand where your contact with the ground is and things like that. Whereas with an optical system, it's pretty straightforward. You do some squats, some lunges, wave your arms around, do a bit of this, and you're done.
Yeah, cool. It's also a lot of information, but still very exciting. So let's come to another aspect of motion capture, because since motion capture is recording real movement, this is not a purely technical process. So can you tell us more about the acting part of motion capture?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I'm very passionate about, obviously. It's fascinating because somebody called it like the closest thing to pure acting, because you have nothing. Now, especially with optical systems, you run the risk of something called occlusion. So that's when you cover a marker. And obviously, the fewer markers the cameras see, the less accurate the movement, or the harder it is to get, good data. And that means that any set building or props or anything, if there's in the environment that this character will be in, if there's a car, you're not going to have a car there. What you're going to have is a bit of tape on the ground signifying where in the space the car is supposed to be and that you're not supposed to walk into that. So it's very exciting, and the more detailed the character descriptions, just like you would detail them for a movie or TV or theater, the better. And then you can really working with an actor can be really rewarding and really challenging at the same time, especially for people who are not used to directing actors. What I've seen most often is that the animators running the session and the actors coming in don't speak the same language. The actor is not technically savvy enough to understand why they want what they want and why not to do certain movements, that you're wasting time, it's very expensive time, doing a movement wrong because, you're covering all these markers. Like, why can't you crawl on your stomach? Why that's challenging, or you can't just go and hug your scene partner, covering everything of both of you. Sometimes they need explaining. At the same time, animators can sometimes just give really vague directions because they don't quite know what the actor needs to hear to get what they want. So it's like, can you just do that, but a little less like that? I literally got that direction before. I'm just like, okay, I need more information. So, it's just really exciting. I mean, you also have more generic stuff, like the stuff that we did for Cinema 4D's content browser. That is quite what I'd call vanilla, because those movements needed to apply to as many different characters as possible. So I wasn't really like characterful in many of them, but the more details, the better. And I will plug this here. If you're an animator who's looking to do a mocap shoot with a professional performer, with a professional actor, please go just on a 1-day direction course. Like, any information you can get on directing is going to serve you so well, just then and in the future. It will be well worth the time spent.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So once everything is recorded, or while recording, what are best practices when it comes to sectioning the movement? Because I think you already have to take care of that while recording.
I think that you're going to want to do that when you're designing the shot list well before you're in the studio. So you're going to want to assign a certain time for how long each clip should be. And a simple reason for that is that the data is what's really expensive. The data itself, if you're in an external studio, you will get charged basically per second of data, of clean data, because in the studio they'll do that for you. But otherwise, even just the file size and everything, like, you're gonna want to, from locomotion, like a couple of seconds is fine. You're not going to want a 20-second walking cycle. You're just going to get, you're going to cut off 4 good steps, and that's your thing. When it comes to recording a scene, like if you want to do something closer to performance capture, I mean, you can still just do mocap. You don't have to do facial capture, but it's a scene, so it's like for your animated short, for example. You're still going to want to be very, very aware of how long a single scene is, because the actor's kind of going to have to run it beginning to end in the way that you section it for your own production. But yeah, so I try to avoid full, like, one take, long multi-minute scenes, because it's going to be very cumbersome working with that data and trying to clean it up. And you're just trying to work with it in Motion Builder or anything like that to clean it before you ever get to properly work with it, because no motion capture data is recorded absolutely perfect. You will always have little things where there's a little glitch in the wrist, or something didn't quite line up right, or somebody's foot showed up connected to their ear, like it's happened before. And you don't want to throw away a good take. So, bear that in mind, that you don't bite off more than you can chew. As an example, that's why it was so groundbreaking that they did really, really long start to finish cinematic scenes for the latest God of War game. It was a really big deal because it was really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That sounds really exciting. And you already shared a ton of very cool and useful tips. So now let me show everyone how to work with the clips from the Cinema 4D asset browser inside of Cinema 4D. And I'll come back to you later with more questions, Marta.
All right.
Fantastic. Now here I'm back inside of Cinema 4D, and I already added this puppet character to my scene, and it is the male puppet from the asset browser. And if I want to assign some motion capture clips to this character, I simply have to go to the motion capture folder here, and here again you can see all of the clips which are available. And we want to add a loop, a walking loop here, but before we do so, let's preview this walking loop. If you select an object, you can go up to this Show Details button, and this will bring up this little new section here, this little interface where you can press play and you can see the animation running. That's quite helpful when you click through all of these assets, and yeah, you can just see what all of the clips are doing. So this is quite helpful. Now let's add this walking loop simply by double clicking it to the scene. You can see there is the walking loop. This is the thing in place, and then there is the motion offset object. Now let's hit play here, and you can see that the rig is walking away, the joint rig here. Now let's get rid of the asset browser for now, and let's try to assign this animation to the character. And this is actually quite simple. What we have here is a tag that is called the character definition tag. And what we have in there, well, as the name suggests, it's the definition of the character. And if we open up the manager here, you can see that once we unfold some of these categories, you can see that we have all of the body parts in here. And if you have a look at the joints section here, there's always minimum one joint attached to this body part. And this is the character definition. If you want to apply an animation from the motion capture library to another character, you need to have character definitions on both the source as well as the target. So if we unfold this one here, you can see that there is also a character definition here on the target. And the rigs of both characters should be as similar as possible when it comes to the structure. They can have different proportions and so on, but in terms of the hierarchy and so on, they should be pretty similar. They don't have to be exactly similar, but it helps if they are as close as possible. And then there is this motion solver tag. And the only thing that you want to do in here is to define the target character and the source character. So if I drag and drop the character definition of the source character in here, these link fields are asking for the character definition, no null or joint hierarchy and so on. It's asking for the character definition. Once I apply it, you can see that it's already walking. The character is already walking, and it's looking quite good, but it's walking in place. If we want the character to move along with the rig, we have to drag and drop the whole hierarchy here under the motion offset null, and then the character will start walking away. Okay, now let's place the male puppet back here. And I want to show you another thing, because in here, in the motion solver, we've got a strength tab. So what we can do is we can define the strength at which the motion capture animation is applied to the character. So we can apply it by around 50%, then it would walk like this. Or we can also bring it back to 100% and define body parts that we can adjust in terms of strength. And in order to do that, we have to go to the character definition tag of the target character. And in here, we open the manager. And as you can see, the very left column is the expose column. So if we want to expose the arms, for example, we can just tick the left arm and the right arm, close this window again, and go back to the character solver tag. And now you can see that our left arm and right arm are exposed, and we can lower the strength of the retargeting for those body parts. And now you can see that the character is walking like this. This is a very handy feature because you can also animate these sliders. So this is pretty cool. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how to set up a custom character to be working with the motion capture clips from the asset browser. All right, here is a character I created, and I already rigged her using the Mixamo control rig. So if I select a few controllers and move them, you can see that she's also weighted already. Let's also double check the feet. Here we go. Yeah, everything seems to work. Perfect. Now, in order to apply motion capture clips from the asset browser, we need to create the connection between the character and the motion capture clips. And in order to do that, we have to create another retargeting rig here. So the thing I want to do is I want to create a copy of the character object, and I also want to go to the layers manager and make the retarget hierarchy visible in the object manager. This is what you can do using this little button here. So I click that, and then I make the character object editable. And here we can see the retarget hierarchy. We're just going to fold it and move it outside of the character object that we made editable. And now we can delete it. The next thing we need to do is we need to get rid of all of the PSR constraint tags here. So here we go. And now it is ready to be used. Now, how can we create this connection? First of all, let me go back to the attributes manager here. And what I want to do next is I want to rename all of these joints in here. So what I do is I middle click the hips joint, and this will select all of its children. You can also right click and go to select children instead. And then I go to tools, naming tool. And in here we can add a prefix. Now let's add the prefix mocap data underscore and replace name. And this way we can add a prefix to all of these joints here. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to go to the character object and in there to the master controller, and we need to use the very same namespace here. So I type in mocap data underscore, and now we can retarget everything. And once I click this button here, retarget all, we can now unfold this hierarchy and, for example, go to spine 1 and use the rotate tool. And now we should be able to move everything using that spline. And also, if we go to the shoulder, we should be able to move the shoulder and so on. Now we already created a connection between the retarget hierarchy and our character object. But one thing that is important before we add some motion capture data to it is we need to set a reference pose. Now with the male puppet character, we saw that the system is expecting a T pose instead of an A pose. So what I have to do before I set the reference pose is to set a T pose here. So what I do is I unfold the hierarchy again, and I go to the left shoulder and move it up by 10 degrees. I do the same thing with the right shoulder, move it up by 10 degrees, and then I go to the right arm, move it up by, let's say, 30 degrees, and I hold down Shift to enable snapping here. Do the same thing with the left one, 30 degrees. Perfect. Now let's go to the character definition tag and set this as the reference pose. Now we are almost ready. We still need to add the character solver tag, and I'm going to add this here on the top level of the hierarchy. I go to rigging tags, character solver. Here we go. And we need to drag and drop our character definition into the target character link field. All right, now we set up the rig completely and we should be able to use a motion capture clip on it. All right, let's try this. And therefore I'm going to the asset browser and I'm going to add the walking loop again. And now let's select the motion solver again and drag and drop the character definition of the walking loop in here. And now you can see this is pretty good already. Let's get rid of the asset browser and let's also make this motion capture hierarchy invisible. And if we scrub the timeline here, we can see that our character has the motion capture data applied to it. Now we can also add some adjustments like rotating the head again. And you can see that this is working. Perfect. Now the next thing I want to show you is how you can blend motion capture data so you can have a soft transition from one motion capture clip to another. And I want to show this to you by using Abe again, Abe from Mixamo. And if I scrub the timeline, you can see that we have a walk cycle animation on him again. He's rigged using the Mixamo control rig. And we also have two more motion capture animations, which is a happy idle as well as a kick animation. And in order to blend those together, we need to take advantage of Cinema 4D's motion system. This means that we need to create motion clips out of these motion capture animations, and then we can use Cinema 4D's nonlinear animation editing system to blend those together. So let's do this. First of all, we need to create a motion clip, and we can create a motion clip for this walk cycle animation simply by selecting the rig that it is applied to and by going to animate, add motion clip. And here we can set a source name. I will name this walking. And then we want to create a motion clip. We want to remove the included animation from the original object. We want to add rotation as well as position. And now we hit OK. And as you can see, the keyframes down here, they disappeared. But if we scrub the timeline, the animation is still there. Now let's adjust the layout and go to the animate layout. And in here, there are three modes: dope sheet mode, F-curve mode, and motion mode. And in motion mode, you can see that we now have this little clip and we can move this around. And we can also, if you have a look at the attributes here, we can add loops like so. We can also reduce them. We can right click and cut the clip, for example, and make transitions and so on. On the very left, there is the library of motion clips available. And right now we just have one because we didn't create motion clips for the other two animations, but this is something we can do now. So let me select the hierarchy for the happy idle. And again, let's go to animate, add motion clip. And now we're gonna type in happy idle as the name. Again, we're gonna use the position as well and hit OK. And now you can see that the happy idle has been added to the list of motion clips. And it also has been added down here on another layer. And then I want to select the hierarchy for the kick and go to animate again, add motion clip, call it kick, include the position and hit OK. And now we've got these three animations stored in motion clips, and we can now get rid of the original hierarchies containing the animation. You will see that now also these two additional layers have been deleted, but now we can start adding these clips to the timeline here on the same layer, for example. And the key for that is that all of these clips have to come with the same rig hierarchy. Otherwise, it won't work. So let me add the happy idle. I'm going to add it here. And now you can see that when I scrub the timeline, Abe is just idling in a happy way. Then here, there's no animation. And here, he's walking. But now, if I move this walking clip towards the happy idle and also make them intersect or overlap, you can see that this is creating a soft transition, and this is how you do it. This is already looking good. Let's do the same thing with the kick. I'm gonna add the kick here, and I'm gonna make it overlap with the walk animation. And here we go, that's looking good. Maybe let's have a look from the other side, from here. So we're starting with the happy idle, then we're walking and kick. Cool. So now the sequence is a little bit too long, so I'm gonna reduce that to 180 frames. And what we can do now in addition is we can still use the Mixamo control rig to add other keyframes. So let me switch back to the startup layout, and the animation is still here. As you can see, that's cool. And let's select his head controller and let's rotate his head to the left and create a keyframe. Then let's rotate it to the right and create another keyframe. So this is looking good. Maybe back to the left. So this is a little bit repetitive now. Like so. Set a keyframe. And then right before he kicks, I'm gonna set another keyframe, and a little bit later, I'm going to reset his head controller to the original rotation and set another keyframe. So what we have now is he's looking around, and then he's looking straight forward, sees something, and then kicks. So we are adding this to the animation. I don't like the timing of this one here. Maybe we move it a little bit forward. That's way better. So here we go. That's pretty cool. Now, what if we want to transfer this animation, well, at least the motion clip part of it, to another character? Well, I invited my dear friend Ortiz, and I'm going to make him visible. And here is one challenge. And this challenge is that the two characters here are coming with completely different proportions. So Abe is thin and he's got long legs, and Ortiz is pretty fat and he's got small legs, but he's pretty massive up here in the torso and shoulder and arms area. So that's another advantage of the retargeting workflow, because it doesn't care about proportions. As long as the rig structure is the same or the character definition is the same, it will work. And now let's have a look at the hierarchy here. You can see that Abe's rig has got a character definition, and so does Ortiz rig. And Ortiz also has got a character solver tag on him. So what we need to do now is we need to drag and drop the character definition from Abe onto Ortiz. And here we go. Now, if we scrub the timeline here, you can see that we are transferring the animation over to Ortiz. Cool. And here I just created a very quick test of an interaction between the two, and I created it literally in just 15 to 20 minutes. So that's quite impressive, and it shows the strength of working with motion capture data and motion clips. All right, so this is how you would work with motion capture clips inside of Cinema 4D. Now let's get back to Marta again, because I've got a few more questions. Hey, Marta.
Hi.
So compared to manually animating characters, mocap is way more realistic. Where do you see challenges regarding the uncanny valley?
I think that's a hard question. And as motion capture systems get better, the data you get through it is better. One particular issue is still with facial capture. I think motion capture, like body capture, has come a very long way. in terms of, just showing very, very realistic movement. But capturing something as complex, actually as fingers, even finger capture is quite challenging, and accurate facial expressions, because we're so in tune with looking at faces and reading faces. And there's so many different muscles at play that capturing that accurately is still hard. And what usually happens is there's a certain amount of the capture, like the facial capture takes it to a certain stage, and then the rest, in a good scenario, the rest is then hand animated and basically corrected by a facial animator, somebody who's entirely dedicated to just animating faces. And I'm talking about photorealistic faces right now. And that, to this day, at least I have rarely seen something that's good enough. Like, I think it's Avengers Endgame that started to really push that and really actually make very, very realistic faces. But that's something that will be the hardest to really, get over. So that's where, as far as motion capture goes, the uncanny valley still is a thing, still relevant. But otherwise, I guess there's a lot of motion capture. The style of recording will be, like I said, with locomotion for video games, like taken from video games, because it's been much more of a thing over the last, decade or so, or 15 years in that industry than necessarily in films. And so there's sometimes little things that are idiosyncratic to game design that make their way through to mocap for other projects. The main one being when you do locomotion for games, you go like, I'm gonna wave and then go back to my idle pose. And then I'm gonna go sit down and go back to my idle pose, just because that means they can be stitched together and come from a pose that, the player can choose at any point. Now that is not realistic. Not realistic. Yeah. That's not how we move. We flow from movement to movement. So that's kind of where the valley, I think, will be a thing. But I think that's just a matter of changing some practices. That's not a technological constraint.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So I've got another exciting topic here and another exciting question. If you think about the future of mocap, what are you excited about and what are you expecting?
Yeah, I'm excited about the concept of markerless capture. Volumetric capture is also very interesting, but generally the concept, the broadest concept of markerless capture. If you think of, those markers are data points that are being provided. Imagine your whole body then being a data point, like covered in data points. Like, you can then get the level of detail that you need to really translate the tiniest movements, the tiniest nuance of performance. These days, as a performer, you're still less so than before, but you still kind of have to be a little bit bigger in your movement for motion capture than you, let's say, would be for film. Like, it's a lot more akin to theater performance, where it's like people need to see you're pointing there than tiny little micro movements. There's a lot of people developing different systems and experimenting with systems where, you can use live action footage and start extrapolating movement data using machine learning, artificial intelligence to try to figure out, certain patterns and things and ways that the machine, especially machine vision, comes into play here, to try to recognize movement, in which case it'll also take it to the next step in terms of motion capturing clothing, for example. That's something I'm very excited about, because when you see a lot of animation, the clothes are actually the thing that's not animated that well, like the clothes, they move around us, especially looser clothes like capes or whatever, they move around us. that is incredibly difficult to animate. And I'm sure I don't need to tell the audience that. And if you could translate that to a CG character, with a motion capture system, that would be amazing. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
That's awesome. So yeah, Marta, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your experience and thoughts. And I hope to see you next time on the next presentation as well.
Yeah, if you're happy, it was a pleasure, and I can talk about this all day.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's really cool how you excited you are about the stuff you do. It's amazing.
Just the best.
Yeah. All right. Bye, Marta.
Bye.
Cool, that was exciting. Now, before I wrap up, let me tell you a bit more about what we do in the training team at Maxon. There is a demystifying webinar each Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific, which is 6 p.m. Central European time. And also, we are running Ask the Trainer sessions twice a month on Thursdays, where you can ask questions about Maxon products and we, the trainers, try to answer them. You can register for both at the Maxon events page. And we are recording all of these sessions. So in case you missed a session, please visit our Maxon Training Team YouTube channel and watch it there. All right, that's all I have for today. Stay safe, and I hope we can see each other next year. Bye.